All right, chapter 2 of The Line Tender. We are on to the expert. My mom was a biologist and the resident shark expert from Massachusetts. When I was a kid, though, I mostly thought she smelled like fish. No matter how hard she scrubbed, when I hugged her, the smell was always there. When I was older, I asked Dad how that had been possible. He said the scent came from dissecting sharks and whales, from cutting away layers of blubber and plunging her hands into the cavities of marine creatures that were 20 times her size. He said that if she wasn't up to her elbows in the guts of a newly dead animal, she was in the ocean looking for live ones. Salt and microorganisms flowing through her hair, even if she hadn't been near the water in days, we could still smell those fish oils in her skin. There was no doubt that she would have been called to the dock for the shark. Fred took another puff on the inhaler and looked at me. "Are you okay?" he said. "Your face is red." "Just hot," I said. A few men pulled the shark up higher by ropes and pulleys, and I followed the length of the shark's white belly from nose to tail. It was probably as long as 3 fishermen stacked end to end, though it twisted as it was raised above the crowd, tied in 3 places. It was like one of those great photos from the early 1900s, where a crazy-looking guy posed with a good-looking mako hung from tail to nose in a straight line. This shark was so large that it had to hang over the water, away from the dock. Its body bent into a horseshoe. The rope near the mouth bound the shark like a rubber band around a fat wrist, separating the head from the rest of the body. The shark looked a little ridiculous at first, but the menace was inescapable if you kept looking. "We've seen it," I said to Fred, staring at the shark. "Can we go?" "You know what this means?" he asked. Not that it mattered whether I knew or not, because he was going to tell me anyway. "What?" I asked. "The field guide," he said with wide eyes, like a strawberry-shaped wobbly goldfish. The field guide was an extra credit project for science class that was due in September. Signing up for it was Fred's idea, and I agreed to help, knowing I'd probably need a little cushion in case I bombed the test during the year. Fred did the writing. All I had to do was provide the illustrations, and I could draw as well as Fred could explain taxonomy. There was one rule about the field guide. We had to see the specimen with our own eyes to include it. So far, we'd come across a black-capped chickadee in Pigeon Cove and a spotted salamander in a rainwater pond in the woods. That was the best we could do on land, until we were staring at the great white shark. While Fred's brain went straight to the field guide, I couldn't shake my mom. I imagined her on the dock between us and the shark, sizing it up before figuring out how she was going to lay it on the ground. "What are they going to do with it?" Fred asked. "Good question," I said. Laughing, the fishermen and orange waiters emerged onto the wharf from the docks below. I knew one of their laughs right away. "It's Sookie," I said, taking a deep breath. Sookie was a 4th-generation Rockport fisherman, and he was a good friend of my parents, except he hadn't come by the house in a long time. Still standing on the dock, he looked like the same man I'd known my whole life. He wore mirrored sunglasses and his brown hair was sun-bleached. Sookie had a reddish tan, not a golden tan like the kind the beachgoers had. He was sweating twice as much as I was. Lester, Sookie's dockhand, was at Sookie's side in matching orange pants. He was 17 and hung out with Fred's older sisters. A crowd of other fishermen and spectators circled around them, and I knew from the handshakes and backslapping that Sookie had caught the shark. "Why would he want to catch a white shark?" Fred asked. "I bet it was an accident," I said. I broke away from the crowd and walked into the mob of people surrounding Sookie. "Sookie!" I yelled. His head turned towards my direction. He patted someone's back and moved to the edge of the mob where I stood. Fred was right behind me. Sookie pushed his sunglasses on the top of his head. His eyes were wild. "Lucy, what do you think?" he said, pointing to the shark. "It's enormous," I said. "What happened?" "We were fishing for cod and it gets stuck in the net." I winced. Yikes. "What do you mean, yikes?" he said. "It's a huge fish." "Well, it's kind of useless now, right?" I asked. "Yeah, what are you going to do with it?" Fred asked. "I thought we'd let it hang for a few days. Keep the tourists off the beach," said Sookie. You really should think about calling a biologist, Fred said. Sookie hesitated for just a moment. Lucy's mom was the only one I knew. He said, I would have called her from the boat. Sookie looked at Fred first and then at me. He pulled my ponytail gently with his fishy hand. I looked him in the eye. I always liked hearing someone else remember my mom. Sook, yelled another fisherman, holding up a camera. Gotta go, he said. I looked at Fred. Are you ready to go now? I asked. There's your dad, he said, pointing. He was still in his work clothes. Dad was a detective, so he didn't wear a normal police uniform. He looked like a regular guy in khakis and button-down shirt. His hairline was wet with sweat. His Minolta SLR hung from a strap around his neck. He'd probably been on his way somewhere else, too. I yelled to him 3 times, but my voice was absorbed into the horde. He settled on a spot in the mob and looked up at the shark, dangling above the crowd. As he raised the camera to his face, I read his lips. Sweet Jesus, he said, as he smiled like a kid.